Shalom Kavrim, Bochim Abayim, very warm welcome in Yeshua's name. We gathered here today again this week because we are entering, in fact, this is the last Torah portion of the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, and we are in Parsha Behar Bechochtai, two combined portions because it's not a leap year. Now, if all of you know that every 4 years, another year is added to the calendar. And during that time, what happens is that some Torah portions are being clubbed together two as one. And this is one of the times where Behar Bechochtai is clubbed together as one Torah portion. Normally every year. But if it's a leap year, then it's read separately. So please turn with me, if you all have your Torah with you, to chapter 25 of the book of Vayikra, and we're going to start reading from Behar, Parsha Behar, and try to understand why I named this Torah portion today and the Shiur today as the Shabbat of the land. It's very, very important to understand contextually what the Torah is about, what the Tanakh is all about, and what the Brit Chadashah, the New Testament, is all about. And when we read through different portions of the Torah, when we read through what the Torah is telling us basically, and how the Torah is guiding our thought process, we will understand that point number one, none of the 5 books of the Torah are written in chronological order. Please make a note of this. It's not written in chronological order. Therefore, you will find portions from Vayikra that's supposed to be in the portions of Exodus chronologically, and Exodus and Numbers and all these places, and especially Vayikra and Shemot. Okay, there's a lot of verses and chapters that refer back to because these two books are primarily books that are written at Har Sinai. Now, this is one Torah portion, Behar, where you realize that, one second, if I'm looking at the Torah in a very chronological manner, this is out of chronological order. Why? Let's read. So, chapter 25, verse 1, it says, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe Behar Sinai Lemor. דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת אליהם תעברו אל הארץ אשר אני נותן לכם ושבת הארץ שבת לאדוני. And the Lord spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai. See, now this is exactly what I'm saying. One second. We read about Har Sinai in the book of Shemot, book of Exodus. And it is in the book of Exodus at Har Sinai that God is giving them the Torah. He's speaking to them. He's calling Moses up onto the mountain. Moses is on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. And now suddenly in the book of Leviticus, in the middle of everything, about them building the Mishkan, right? And practicing the Mishkan and getting the commemoration of the Mishkan done. And now suddenly, Torah is telling us, and these are the words that the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. That means we are referring back to the 40 days that Moses is on the mountain, right? And then it says, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you, the land shall observe a Shabbat, rest for the Lord. It's very interesting. We've always thought, that as a human being or as the Jewish nation, as the children of Israel, that they have to perform and keep the Shabbat. The Lord is saying something else, that they have to perform and let the land keep a Shabbat for the Lord. What does this mean? Now, just to give you a brief, we've run through this many, many times before. If you'll do remember, the word land, Eretz, okay, or Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. The word Eretz itself comes from the word Ratzon, which is will. Will. from where you also get the word rats, to run. What is the will? How do you define a will of a person? How do you define the innermost being of a person? Is through his will to live, will to survive. And that is called running from the biblical point of view. So every day when we wake up to a new day and we want to say that, okay, today I'm going to pray, today I'm going to work for the Lord, today I'm going to go to office, today I'm going to study, and today I'm going to teach, today I'm going to go shopping, today I'm going to do this. And it is my innermost being, my will, running in this world. Okay, so that concept of running is very, very important. Okay, and that's how we get the word ratson, to run. Okay, ratson means will, rats to run, and from where we get the word eretz, land. Now, contextually, land is something that has its own will. And if you would believe it or not, all the nations, finally, every nation that's districted, bordered, separated with its own language, its own culture, has its own will. But the lands of the earth are not willing to do God's to listen to the eternal Father, except for the land of Israel, because the land of Israel has its own will. That's why it's called Eretz Israel, and the land wanting to do the will of the eternal Father, okay, has to keep the Shabbat, even with the human being, even with the children of Israel. So God is saying, it's not only you that needs to keep the Shabbat, you will also allow the land to keep the Shabbat. Very interesting. Violation of that is going to cause many, many problems. And we're going to read through all these problems out here, right? Okay, then it says, Shesh Shanim Tizara Sharek Veshesh Shanim Tizmor Karmecha Ve'asafta Et Tavuathem. For 6 years you may sow your land, and for 6 years you may prune your vineyard, and you may gather in its crop. But on the 7th year, which is the year of Shabbat, okay, you will give the land a complete rest, and there shall be for a Shabbat for the Lord. Your field you shall not sow, and your vineyard you shall not prune. The aftergrowth of the harvest you shall not reap, and the grapes of your keeping away you shall not pick. It shall be a year of rest for the land. Now, we must understand why God is saying this. From a natural point of view, too, okay, if you've been very close to understanding agricultural practices, if you've been speaking to an agriculturist, a person who is not only a farmer, but also an agriculturist, right? He will tell you that there is a concept in agriculture called rotation of crops. That means you will go through a couple of cycles of growing, right? Seeding, growing, reaping of the land. And then after that, you will let the land rest in fallow, right? You let the land in fallow for some time till the land gets its strength back again. And in that fallow, what normally do agriculturists and farmers do is to, rejuvenate the land by way of uh, uh, they use cow dung and whole lot of things, natural substances to refurbish the land. So the land gets its strength back. And once it gets its strength back after the fallowing time, then it's able to produce good agriculture and good produce going ahead. If you do not allow the land to fallow on its own and to regain its strength, it'll die. The land itself will lose its strength to produce good fruit and vegetables. So this is normal human understanding of agriculture. okay, which is following the biblical principles also. You notice that even God is saying the same thing. You will allow the land to fallow for the seventh year. But in the context of the Bible, in the context of Jerusalem, in context of the land of Israel, the best of the produce needs to be given for the temple rituals and for the temple offerings, the bikurim, the first fruits, the wheat, the barley. God needs the best from that point of view. And all this is connected with the maser, with the tithing system in the land of Israel. So actually, when you're talking about tithing system, biblically, the tithing in the entire system of maser is connected to the land, the produce of the land, allowing the land to fallow for that seventh year, and the produce that the land gives in its strength will be given now for the temple in Jerusalem. This is the connection of tithes. Now, there are many Jewish people also are living in the land. Okay, half of them are very secular, half of them are orthodox or observant, Torah observant, right? Uh, they they kind of practice tithing system, but it's still connected to the land. So what the land produces, they're given for their tithes, or they cannot. There's no temple to give it, so they convert it into money, right, into kesef, and they give them the offerings. But the Jews are outside the land; they're not connected to the land, so the land there's no question of tithes. So they convert that also into money and give it in. But make no mistake, if there is a temple today, the entire system of tithing will restart because the best of the land needs to go into the temple, and then what is remained has to be given to the people, and the people will uh, use the produce for God. Okay, so we've seen now why the land is important. Why is the land important? Uh, one reason is that if I go to a very ancient reason, is that the land of Israel today is also the ancient land of Gan Eden, Garden of Eden. And Adam and Chava were put there to till the land and to produce from the land the best of everything so they can be offered to God. And they were made to be husbandmen of the land. But then they sinned, they were thrown out from the garden, right? And they were thrown out from the land and they were wandering, and whatever happened to them, right? Uh, they were not able to do the things that God wanted them to do, to look after the land and till the land and grow produce. Now we are looking at 2000 years after that, God chose Abraham, okay? And he brought Abraham and he said, I'm going to make a people out of you. And then from Abraham, you have Isaac, and Isaac, Yaakov, and Yaakov finally is the Jewish nation. And the Jewish nation then finally is been given the task to do the things that Adam and Chava was supposed to do in Gan Eden. So he brings them back to the land. The land now, being Garden of Eden, is God's land. He said, the land is mine. So he's training them by way of looking after the land, following the land, making the land proper. So the tithing, the maser, every instruction that was given to Adam and Chava, now the children of Israel have to do and reproduce Gan Eden in the land of Israel. Very, very simple. So that's the ancient way to look at what's happening. Then it goes on to say, but on the seventh, okay, the aftergrowth of your harvest you shall not reap, and the grapes of your keeping away you shall not pick. It shall be a year of rest for your soul. The resting of the land shall be yours to eat for you and for your slave and for your maidservant and for your hired worker and for one who resides with you. This word, the one who resides from you, is Toshav, is your guest, and the one who resides for you is the word Gerim. So who's a ger? Somebody who joins himself with Israel. Somebody who says, your God is my God, your people are my people. Okay, that is a gerim. That means I have forsaken idolatry of this world. I have forsaken my gods of this world. I've come to the Jewish nation and say, okay, please accept me as a Jew. I'm a gerim today. I'm not a native of the land, but I am a gerim. And then God says out here that this law will apply even to the ger. Even to the ger, this law will apply. And then he goes on to say, and for your animal and for the beast that is in your land shall all its crop be cut. So basically, you will not you will let the seventh year remain fallow. You will not uh, sow seed. On the eighth year, you will not harvest anything. The spillover of the food that is grown, you will be able to eat for the seventh year and the eighth year. Your sowing will start in the eighth year, right? Or it will be year one again, which is the eighth year. And then that produce you'll be able to have in the ninth year, but God will give you enough for you to overtide the seventh and the eighth year. Ninth year, you will be comfortable. Very, very simple. Then in verse 8 she says, Visafta lecha shavatot shanim, shiva pe'amim, vehayu lecha yeme shiva shavtot hashanim tisa ve'arbaim shana. You shall count for yourself 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 years, 7 times, and the days of the 7 Shabbats of the years shall be for you 49 years, and you shall sound uh, a blast on the shofar. That is, when you're blowing the shofar, you have the 3 blasts. One is the long blast, one is the staccato, and one is the medium blast, right? So it says you will blow broken blasts on the 7th month, on the 10th of the month, on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, you shall sound the shofar throughout the land, and you shall sanctify the 50th year, and you shall proclaim freedom throughout the land for all its inhabitants. So this is what we call the Yovel, right? And what are the laws and the commandments God gave during the Yovel? During the Yovel, one, you will forgive all debt. That means if I owe somebody money and somebody owes me money, I will cancel off. I'll go to my books. I'll say, strike off, written off. You know what written off is, right? When you're doing accounts, written off, thrown away, not to be remembered. And likewise, everybody in the land of Israel will strike off debt completely. Everyone. I don't owe you. You don't owe me. It's all over in 50 years. 50 years have passed. Whatever is my debt remaining, it's written off. I am free. You are free. Everybody is free. If I've taken land on lease from somebody else, I will return it back. If I've bought land from somebody, I will return it back. The land will not be sold in perpetuity. This is what God says in the Torah. He says, the land will not be sold in perpetuity. For you, it shall be, you shall not sow. Okay, for it is a Yovel, it shall be holy to you. From the field you shall eat its crop. In this Yovel year you shall return each man to his ancestral heritage. That means if you are from the tribe of Shimon and you're residing in the land of Naphtali, you will go back to the land of Shimon. Likewise, all the migrations will come back and you'll go back. It's like pressing a complete reset button. What are the advantages of this? The advantages of this is that it mitigates debt, destroys debt completely. No one's a debtor to anybody. No one's going to fight. No one's going to take anybody to court. No one's going to have problems. No one's going to hate, murder, steal. All that, God said, will be negated in the 50th year, and you will rest in the 50th year. completely rest. In this modern world, Israel cannot do it because we're living in a completely different world altogether. Completely different world. Everything centralized, money is interconnected world over, right? So you can't do it in this world. But I think it's a brilliant system, absolutely brilliant system. And then it goes on to say, then it goes on, many laws about buying the land, selling the land, buying the house, selling the house, returning the house. If you bought something just before the Yovel and the Yovel starts and you have to return it back in 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 the amount of years or months or days or whatever you have bought, you will calculate accordingly, okay, pro rata basis, and you will pay and this thing, and you will release everything. Everything will be released by blowing of the shofar. Okay, so I'm not going to run through all those things which is written out here. In verse 18, oh sorry, verse 17 onwards. Verse 17 onwards, okay, it says, do not harass one another, and you shall have fear of the Lord your God, for I am the Lord your God. You shall perform my decrees and my observances and my ordinances, my kokotai, and perform them, and you shall dwell securely on the land. The land will give its fruit, and you will eat to its satisfaction, and you will dwell securely upon it. If you will say, what shall we eat in the seventh year? Behold, we will not sow and we will not gather a crop. This is typical human mentality, right? If I'm not going to work, who's going to give me the thing? If I don't sow, who has food? Don't believe in God's word. You don't believe what He's saying, you're going to fall into trouble. Or behold, we will not sow and we will not gather a crop. I will ordain, God says, I will ordain my blessings for you in the sixth year, and it shall yield a crop sufficient for the 3 years. What an amazing blessing this is. Only follow the commandments of letting the land remain fallow, and the 3 years onto that, God will look after you. Now, I was talking to some bankers the other day, right? And and we were talking about how things have become more expensive. Banks have become, they're more infringing, and it's like, you take a bank loan or you take this loan, it's just going to choke you. And the entire system of banking, uh, that person told me one thing. He says, we gauge uh, the economy of scale on a 7-year period. So I was amazed. I said, really? He says, yes. Every 7 years, okay, you need to understand that every 7 years, everything changes. Everything changes in 7 years. That means the work environment changes, uh, price changes, cost changes, products change, mentalities change, tastes change. So in 7 years, whatever you're planning, you're going to plan for 7 years, and after 7 years, things will change. Now, if I look biologically also, your entire body, your cellular structure of your body changes every 7 years. So it takes 7 years for you, for the final cell in your body to go. And then you're a new person. Every 7 years, you're a new person biologically. And this is how God has created everything. And I was really amazed. So I was thinking about this and said, Lord, really amazing. Now, even when you look at this world structure and the world system, right? Many religions also have this periods of, uh, these are the times, that according to your mazal and according to your birth sign, these are the times you'll be good, and these are the times that are going to be really tough for you, right? We live in India, right? So we have this system of saying, that okay, 21 years is going to be good for you. 7 years after that is going to be a time of testing, which is, as per the calendar in this country, they attribute it to a certain planet and all that stuff. You can attribute it to anything, but this is the system God has put in place. He has put in place, and every person needs to go to that system, depending how you have fed for those 21 years or over the 7 years. So every 7 years, it's like one big check. It's one audit point. God says, get everything in check. And if we audit ourselves every Shabbat of every week and every Rosh Chodesh of every month, and on the Chagim and on the festivals are not there to rejoice. The festivals are audit points in everybody's life. And every year during your Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and you're dealing with your problems and sins, and you're standing out there and say, God, forgive me. Not only asking for forgiveness, but I'm also doing restitution for this and for that and for this. And Lord, clear me out. If I don't do that, then it's going to pile up in these 7 years, and there's going to be pain in them. Therefore, we look at people's life and say, okay, I need to redeem. There's a lot of things happening in my life. You've gone through it. I've gone through it. I know what I've gone through. Everybody knows, you know, last 3 years has been a problem. Last 2 years has been a problem. Things have not been going good. It's because the system got put in place. It's helping you to sort it out in your own. Be aware of this. So have faith in God, because God knows what He's doing. Okay. But we have to learn from this. We have to learn from this. So God says, I will attain my blessings for these 3 years. And for these 3 years, you will have enough. Considering that you keep the commandments, you have to keep the laws of the land, especially for the Jewish nation. They have to, when they come into the land, keep the commandments, do the things, keep the land fallow, give the offerings, the meal offerings, the bread offerings, the bikurim, the first fruits. All this was required of them. One of the reasons they went into exile is because they broke the Shabbat of the land. That is why God threw them out and took them to Babylon for 70 years. They were in exile in Babylon in 70 years. I'll come back to the exile in 70 years and what exactly happened and why something has fundamentally changed in the 70 years. When we're reading the Torah and we're reading the Old Testament, you will notice God says that, okay, let's read this more. I'll come back. It says, the land, verse 23. Okay, it says, Veharetz lo timacher latzamachtha ki li haaretz ki gerim vetoshavim otem imadi ובכל ארץ אחוזתכם נעלה תיתנו לארץ. For the land is mine, for your sojourners and residents with me. In the entire land of your ancestral heritage, you shall provide redemption for the land. We always thought, it's about human beings, that they need to be redeemed from sin. Even the land, whatever we do, if we buy a piece of land and we are corrupt and we do fraud on the land, or we mistreat the land, or we do murder and spill blood on the land wanting to do God's will is suffering. And it has a direct response effect on humanity. And then you'll see the land is not producing. There's famine on the land. There's drought on the land. This is happening. And we're suffering and we're wondering, climatic changes. Oh, let's protect the environment. Hello. All wisdom has been given to us from here, from the Torah. One of the things I keep saying as believers in Yeshua and of the faith, and if, from the Christian faith and those who say, okay, I am a Christian and I'm a staunch Christian, I'm a Christian faith. Your life is much more than you. Your life is about knowing through the wisdom of God, protect your environment, protect the land that you're in. Be sensible in how you're dealing with animals, with plants. The original conservationist and environmentalist comes from the Bible and comes from the Torah. If you'll understand these truths, you don't need to tag yourself and form an NGO or form a forum or form a big league that says, okay, this we are looking at green environment, uh, uh, peace, and some. No, no, no. Individually, the Torah already tells you look after the environment, look after the animals, look after the plants. It tells you this. Your role is much more than going to church and calling yourself a Christian. So I say to everyone in the faith, wake up, be sensitive to environment, stop polluting, treat animals with respect, plants. It's all in our hands. You don't need some politician or some bureaucrat to tell you, that we are in trouble. The Torah is already telling you that, friends. Okay, let's go ahead. We have many things to talk about out here. For the land is mine, it says. And then he says, if your brother who owns a piece of land has fallen into hard times because he has not kept the commandments, you will not look down upon him. You will redeem him, you will redeem the land. If because of his impoverished state, he has sold it to a non Jew, if he sold it to somebody who's not from the land, you will go and buy it back from that person and return it back to him. You will redeem him. Tell me something. How many of us stand for each other? How many of us have the capabilities to stand for each other? You know why we cannot stand for one another? Because we ourselves are in the same problem with everybody else. I want you to think about these things. And now, although we're talking about the land of Israel here, contextually, but I also want you all to think about our lives because we are drawing wisdom and strength from all of this. Okay, then it talks about the house, about the land, about relationships, about your brother. So many, I'm not going to go through all of this. Okay, you'll read it when you'll have time, when you'll go back home tonight. And then Behar ends with idolatry. Okay, then go to Bechochotai, chapter 26. If you will go in my statutes and my observance of my commandments and perform them, then I will provide your rains in their time, and the land will give its produce, and the tree of the field will give its fruit. Threshing will overtake the vintage for you, and the vintage will last until the sowing, and you will eat your bread to satiety, and you will dwell securely in your land. I will provide peace in the land, and you will lie down with none to frighten you. I will cause wild beasts to withdraw from the land, and the sword will not cross your land. You will pursue your enemies, and they will fall before you by the sword. 5 among you will chase 100, and 100 of you will chase 1,000. That's what the Torah says. And I will turn to you. I will make you fruitful and increase you, and I will establish my covenant with you. And you will eat that which is very old and remove the old to make way for the new. I will place my tabernacle among you, and my soul will not purge itself of you. If we are reading this in the Hebrew, it's completely tremendous, beautiful context. I will walk among you, I will be a God to you, and you will be a people unto me. Simple, not flashy, everything, all the promises, covenants that were given in Torah, God says, I will walk among you, I will live with you, I will tabernacle with you, I will make you fruitful in the land, and you will remain on the land. Now, when I'm thinking about this, I'm also thinking of another angle now. And it's a very important angle. If the Torah and everything that's given for the Jewish people, and also given for those who come to the faith, right, is about living good in the land. Because nowhere in the Torah does it ever mention that you live good, you do the right things, that when you die, I'm going to take you to heaven, I'm going to resurrect you, and there's going to be new heavens and the new earth. All those things we find in the New Testament, it does not exist in the Torah and the Old Testament. It does not exist, my friends. Now we have a problem, and a very good problem, a problem that needs to be addressed and asked. If God's intent was always about them living in the land, keeping the land good, and God living among them and tabernacling with them, one second. Why does the New Testament talk to me about that we all have to die and we're all going to go to heaven and be with the Lord, and there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and we're all going to come, and the Lord will come when the trumpets blast, and there's going to be. From where did all this come? This, how did things change? Why is there so much of a change from the Old Testament to the New Testament? Because if you are reading the Brit Chadashah, the New Testament, it does not talk about the kind of promises of the Old Testament. It does not mention anything about living in the land. It doesn't mention anything about flourishing in the land. It does not talk about staying and following the commandments in the land, that God will bless you and He'll give you a long life, and you will have children and children after children will be. It does not talk of any of the stuff. The theme of the New Testament is just redemption, salvation, waiting for the Lord, walking the path of the Holy Spirit, and waiting for the coming of the Lord, and we all go to heaven. Huge quantum jump in the theology between the two books. Now, this is where we need to reconcile what is happening. The first mention of life after death, you will find, I think there's a hint of it in the book of Job, where Job says, that I know that I will see my maker with my eyes, right? It's a hint. It's a remez. It's not something that is, you can pinpoint and say it's theology of that. But it's in the book of the prophet Navi Daniel. Daniel says, he says that, in the Michael, the big prince, comes and he says, you write this up, and he says, in that day there will be a great awakening, and those who are lying in the dust will rise again, some to everlasting life, and some to shame, and some to Daniel. But Daniel is prophesying all of this during the 70 years of exile in Babylon. Now, this is where everything changes, and this is where everything becomes very interesting. So the violation of the land, idolatry, were the main causes that God took them out, destroyed the temple, the Beth Hamikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built, and took them into exile to Babylon. Now, if you want to know what happened in Babylon, we can go through hours and hours of discourse on that. Too much to talk about. But in short, fundamentally, Judaism of the day changed in Babylon big time. Because when they went to Babylon, there was no temple. They could not have the tithe system. The halakha was completely disjointed. They were in shock because the entire life revolved around what we are talking about. It was just not there. God took them out and just threw them to Babylon. Among the nations, they got together and they formed many, many things. Okay, when we're doing the historical courses, I will do all specifically about the Geula and the Galut of the exile. And it is there that God finally starts revealing the future through Daniel. And then he gives the vision of Daniel about going back into the land. And once they come into the land, he talks about the prince, the Greek, Alexander, who will come, right? And then the king of the north, the king of the south, right? Ptolemy, and that guy from the north, they would fight, and whole lot of, and then the prophecies go on, and then the cutting of the Messiah, cutting off of the Messiah in halfway, and whole lot of things. And then towards the end, he says, yes, and many who are lying in the dust will rise and say, that's the first instance. Now we're looking at coming out of the land. This concept of living on the land, living on the earth, now is going to fundamentally change. Therefore, in Babylon, in the formation of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the Tzokim and the Purushim, it is in Babylon that the Purushim, due to the fact being influenced of Daniel and the theology of Daniel, finally, in the Anshe Knesset HaGadolah, the men of the Great Assembly, when they were studying Torah and they were studying the sages and they were studying Daniel, and because Daniel also was part of that 120 men of the Great Assembly, Daniel, Nehemiah, Ezra, the scribe of Jeremiah, a lot of the other prophets, okay, they were all part of this at some point of time, those 120, and they adapted and they brought in many progressive thinkings in the theology of Judaism. And one of those progressive theologies is about the resurrection of the dead. This is the split between the Levites, who are actually the Stokim, Sadukim, or which is called Sadducees, and the common people who are just religious, called the Pharisees or the Purushim. So when they come back to the land now, Ezra, Nehemiah comes, he rebuilds, Ezra comes, he dedicates, right? We all know the story about Ezra and Nehemiah. And then the problem that happens, what happens then is that Ezra and Nehemiah now are dealing with problems in the land, because the intermarriage and so many things. But the halakha, they're very clear about the halakha, that the Pharisees now have come out of Babylon and they've installed synagogues, which is called Bet Midrash, Bet Tefillah, okay, and then they set up also the Sanhedrin, okay, which is actually called the Bet Hadin, the court system, and the Bet Tefillah and the Bet Midrash, okay, which is the yeshivas, the study houses, the prayer houses, and the court system. So they come back to the land, and the Purushim are pursuing the thoughts and the theologies that was formulated by Daniel about in the end of days, the concept of Messiah came about, and that that there will be a resurrection of the dead, and all this started with the Pharisees. The Sadducees came back to the land after the exile and said, we have the land back with us. We have the Beth HaMikdash, we have the temple. Now we will perform the commandments and we will live in the land as God wanted us. And once we die, that is it. It's over and done with. Therefore, we read in the New Testament, the Sadducees were the ones who rejected resurrection of the dead, rejected life after death, and a whole lot of things. And they were constantly in turmoil. The Pharisees were fighting with the Sadducees for control of the Beth HaMikdash, and that was history. Now we are catapulted into the New Testament, because when they came into the land, there was a time of tremendous learning among the Pharisees, especially during the Zugot, the 5 pairs who sat and debated all the halakha of the Torah, right? Which finally was written down called the Mishnah. It was written down as the oral Torah was written down, but they debated and they formed halakha, and it became too complex. I'm giving a lot of historical background for you all to understand, to bridge the gap between the old and the new, right? That's what I'm doing. And then from the Zugot, then came the time of the Purushim, the scribes and the Pharisees and the sages of Israel, like tremendous people like Rabbi Akiva, Gamliel, and this was all during the time that finally Yeshua just appeared upon this earth. He came into this time. And Gamliel himself The last two, that's Hillel and Shammai, were the last two of the Zugot, basically. And it was Hillel who was still alive when Yeshua walked this earth. And Hillel was more of the conservative, yes, but he was a little more liberal than Shammai. Shammai was very, very strict in his outlook in interpretation of the Torah and application of it. And Yeshua was a young man at that time. And then from Hillel, it went to Gamliel, and Gamliel, the elder, and Gamliel was the teacher of Rav Shaul, of Paul. So Paul is getting all his theology, including the resurrection of the dead, everything that's all coming from Daniel that came in from exile. So we see a kind of progressive theology that's coming in right from the Old Testament into the New. But it is the Pharisaic movement in its essence that basically is drawing all this and coming into the New Testament. Now, whether we like it or not, we can be very averse to Pharisaic traditions and say, okay, the Pharisees were bad and this and that. One second, you have to understand, because if Jesus himself endorsed life after death and spoke about life after going, and spirit life and being filled with the Spirit, these are all Pharisaic traditions. Yeshua himself taught in synagogues. Synagogues were the places that were meant for Pharisees and not for Sadducees. Sadducees would never even step foot into a synagogue, which means the essence of Pharisaic Judaism of the day is what Yeshua was interpreting in this right context. But where they were going wrong in his application and in his hypocrisy, he was whacking them for it. So in many ways, whether you like it or not, Yeshua himself was from the Pharisaic background, but he was doing the right thing and he was setting house in order according to the Pharisaic thought, not the Sadducee thought. Okay. So when I was sitting and thinking about this, and I was reading Behar Bekho Khudka, and I said, Lord, everything's about the land. Everything about doing the right things, following the commandments, being fruitful, and God's going to bless you. You'll live a long life and good life. You'll have children, and God's going to bless you. God says, I will dwell among you in the land. That is it. It's so simple. When did this all change? When did this all change? When did God finally decide and say, okay, there's going to come a time where iniquity and sin is going to grow so big that it's impossible for the human or for the man to finally actually be righteous and holy compared to the fathers and forefathers of old. So if you compare any person today to what Abraham was that point of time, Abraham would, in comparison, would be divine, really divine. God would have still managed the earth and the ways of this earth and kept it going, because there would have been enough people with Avram who he had converted and who had changed, and the worlds would have been good. But we live in a world today that is so full of iniquity, so full of tuma and zohama, that God finally at some point of time said, let this world perish. It needs to perish. It needs to go. And then those who are connected to me in this dying world, when the world finally runs out of steam and light, I will resurrect. Therefore, he sent salvation to collect those souls. He sent a son to collect the souls that they will resurrect in righteousness. Those who are not collected by his son will rise up in shame and in eternal damnation. And the sages, till that point of time, from the beginning till the resurrection of Yeshua, those sages were kept in a specific place called Avram's bosom, and they resurrected with Yeshua also. If you read the book of Matthew, it says that, many graves were open and the prophets were all were just walking around the streets, and people are saying, oh my God, I can see Elijah, I can see Moses, I can see this. What's happening? Why are they all raised? From where have they come? So that fruit was also taken and kept for a time and for a season in the heavens till the regeneration and for the rectification that is to come. So God has said, the Father said, humanity, everybody is going to die because the impurity is too much. Can't come out of it. Let it die. It's better if it dies so I can renew everything. The world system is crumbling. The Bible, the New Testament says, for it's groaning like a woman in birth pangs. Let in its corruption, let it die in its corruption. God will renew the heavens and the earth and give us a new heavens and the earth, and then He will give us a new body. So we will come back in a new body, and then everything will be equal enough to live in this new perfect world. Okay. So the line of thought which I'm giving on today is very simple. Do not disconnect the Old Testament with the New Testament. When you're reading the New Testament, at least when I read the New Testament, I am a little amazed because the New Testament looks like, you know, it's only a storyline about redemption and salvation and the future to come. But you have to find the foundations in the New Testament. If you don't find the foundations, you're going to use it standalone. You're going to create your own theology. You're going to create your own, and this is what people have done, create your own theology. Religions have been formed. People have gone wayward, even as far as 150 years ago. Okay, it amazes me when I think of this. You have to take the New Testament in the context of the whole scripture. It fits perfectly well in its concept and its theology. Written in the Greek, the delivery of the New Testament, I find it really, really difficult because not in the case of difficult as to I don't understand it, but I have so many questions the way it's written because uh, if you're not trained in the Old Testament, you're not going to be able to get the foundation to understand the New. And this is what we're trying to do with the yeshiva to make everybody have this foundation. So all that we've spoken about, the world to come, Ulam Habba, Takiyat Hamidim, the resurrection of the dead, right? The coming of the Messiah. Again, it's all biblical truth. It's all there. Okay. But we have to put in the right context, my friends. And if anybody's reading the Old Testament and finding disparity and saying, 1 second, you know, God does not talk about the heavens. There is no heavens of mention out here. God saying, you just follow my commandments and you're going to live a good life in this land and I'll give you a long life. What is this thing about going to heaven? People have gone crazy about it. Theology has been formed. People's minds are there. I tell everybody, keep a balance. We need to live correctly in the land also. We need to live perfectly well out here. And this itself is a blessing, tremendous blessing. Because all of us are going to die one day. And all of us are going to go back to this earth. The earth is going to be renewed. But till that time, let's keep a balance in all things. We don't know when the Lord's going to come. We have no idea. But till then, we have the Torah, the commandments, and the Kokot to perform, my friends. So please read this Torah portion again. I went, very simple. I could not go into the details of everything, but I urge you all to read, to understand everything that we have studied and learned today, my friends, and may you all have a more comprehensive and sustainable understanding of the Torah and the scriptures and the Bible from beginning to end. God bless all of you all. Shabbat Shalom. Till we meet next Friday. And I will see all of you all for, if you all have time, for Shacharit prayers in the morning at 6:45. We have Shacharit prayers. I would urge everybody to please come and uh, and do join. God bless. Till we meet next time. Shalom.